So I got kind of fixated on sinkholes in like my freshman or sophomore year of college because I was taking a biology class, I think. But my professor was really cool and he was talking about fracking and stuff and kind of how that affects sinkholes. And I was just like, I didn't know that correlated. So I took 3 hours and I wrote a 7-page paper on sinkholes. I am not a scientist or a geologist. I just really like sinkholes. If any information that I say is incorrect and you do know about rocks, please correct me. I would love to learn more. I'm just gonna be reading off my laptop. Just kind of everything I wrote. It's a big word vomit on sinkholes. Anyways, all right. A sinkhole, or a karst terrain, karst meaning landscape formed by the dissolution of soluble rock by groundwater that has become acidic. A sinkhole doesn't have to be a sinkhole yet to be qualified as a sinkhole. A sinkhole is basically any spot with a cavity that has no drainage except into the soil and the rock in the land underneath. So no, like, it's not going into a river. It's not like going into a stream. It's just, it's getting soaked in like a sponge. Eventually the surfaces will get so wet that they'll end up caving in, but where do they cave into? Like, what's underneath a sinkhole? So a sinkhole, sorry, you can't fucking see my face. The glare on my glasses is really bad. Most sinkholes lead into systems of caves or aquifers where a lot of fresh drinkable water is sourced from. So whenever a sinkhole caves into one of those aquifers, specifically in Florida, we get a lot of our fresh water from aquifers. This can cause a lot of pollutant issues, and even if they're able to like filter out the pollutants, it's like that takes a lot of energy to filter out the pollutants, which is why like save water is a thing. Like, yeah, we've got like a lot of fucking water, but it's the energy that it takes to filter out that water, which is why we have to save the clean water. Do you know what I mean? Okay, anyways, a sinkhole or a start of a sinkhole can just be a few inches big, and once fully caved, it can be like absolutely colossal. So China is home to some of the oldest and deepest sinkholes. They're called the Heavenly Pits. There's like, I think about 100 of them or so. Sorry, that one I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head. But they're called the Heavenly Pits. That's not the name that they call it in Mandarin. But I can't pronounce that and I'm not gonna butcher it. With the largest measuring over 2,000 feet deep. These pits are really, really old. They're not like occurring now. But the ancient pits contain entirely unique ecosystems as well, with the possibility of having never discovered species. So this hole has basically, the biggest one has grown its own unique jungle inside of it because it's so fucking old that like any smushy ground down there has now become populated and fertile from all the water and the nutrients that are then falling into the hole, and then seeds from the trees are growing into there. But since a lot of creatures can't go in or out unless you're a bird or some weird little organism, some weird goober gop can happen down there, and it hasn't really been discovered at all. So there's a lot of cool shit that could happen down there, kind of like an axolotl sort of environment. But yeah, it's been adapted over time and it's untouched by man. The first sinkhole, however, recorded occurred in my wonderful home state of Florida. It's 200 feet wide and about 36 feet deep. It's a sinkhole in Tallahassee, but it's now completely underwater, and it was most likely underwater when it was first discovered. This isn't the first sinkhole ever. It's the first sinkhole that's been interacted by with man. So this is the first sinkhole that we know that man interacted with. And it was most likely used as like a watering hole, as like easy ways to get sources of like fish or nutrients or clean drinking water, stuff like that. But they found pieces of bone and stuff and like tusk and different sort of human resources that like, you know, but it's from about 14,500 years ago, and human life and matter was discovered inside of the hole. Now why do sinkholes erode other than just erosion from water? Sinkholes, especially in modern times, can be caused for a multitude of reasons, but at the end of the day, it's all erosion. Erosion can be for water soaking into the soil. Seasonal changes can be a cause too, with the freezing and thawing of ground. Heavy spring rains, water can also be soaked into the soil from human-caused reasons such as poor water management, leaky pipes, poor drainage, busted water main, pool draining, and river channeling. River channeling is basically like you take a river and then you go, ooh, I don't want that fucking river there anymore. And you move it into, like, you redirect the river into a new spot. Sometimes that ground isn't, like, meant to have a river on it. So then the water will erode the land a lot faster than it should have. Humans also love to disturb the soil for reasons of the soil for reasons of progress, such as infrastructure. If the land isn't tested for suitability for building, or improper materials are buried under the ground during construction, when you build a building, you have to basically dig up all the dirt, clear out the dirt, get new good dirt, which is strange, but like the dirt gets brought out and then fresh dirt gets brought in because all that dirt has to get filtered and all the gunk in it, like really big rocks, tree debris, natural matter, just garbage in general, because it's 2026, that has to get removed, and then the good dirt gets brought in and then it gets compacted. But that takes a lot of time and money. So if it's done improperly, that stuff will dissolve and dissettle over time, and that'll cause the building to also dissettle, and it'll rot away at the ground underneath it, and it's just everything just, it just caves in. But overload of the soil or improper drilling for pipes can also trigger the soil to cave in. So like putting plumbing in, stuff like that. Now the big whammy on why I got so interested in sinkholes is oil. Oil is found in pretty similar underground caves, the same way water is found in an aquifer. Fracking for oil accelerates the speed of erosion of soil by destabilizing it and emptying out a previously filled cavern. Fracking for oil involves injecting a high-temperature liquid, usually water, to remove the oil from the bedrock, but that is also completely butterfly affects the deterioration of the bedrock as well. So rainwater that would naturally be soaking into the bedrock, now it's fucking really, really hot and it's being forced into there. And then that kind of like, it'll create ripple effects and kind of disrupt everything underneath. So even if the sinkhole doesn't occur directly where the fracking was occurred, it can dissettle the nearby land and make that more loose. I'm mind blanking on the proper word, but it makes it looser. Where did I leave off? Okay, butterfly effects of deterioration of the bedrock as well. Texas and the middle United States had a lot of issues with this. A lot of oil drilling in Texas, even though it's pretty dry over there, but we'll get to the dry land issues in a minute. So drilling for oil in icy regions is a double whammy as well, because the drilling will disrupt the soil and then the ice will then thaw and then add even more liquid into an already unstable soil, and then add on the side effects of the usual using of the oil, greenhouse gases, that are affecting the Earth's ecosystem and causing more haphazard weather environments, such as acid rain. Acid water deteriorates faster than regular water, especially for like stuff like limestone in Florida, where it really like it interacts with it very quickly because it's very porous and acidic. More irregular hurricanes, snowstorms, and droughts. It just becomes a big vicious cycle. Sinkholes aren't random, but they seem like it because they portray it on the news and they're just like, oh, sinkhole happened. Oh. They form slowly, depending on the circumstances, of course, until a complete collapse occurs and then kind of all hell breaks loose. Sinkholes are repairable, depending on the size, of course. You're not going to fix like the one in China that's like 2,000 feet deep, but you can fix like one that's a couple feet deep or one that hasn't fully formed yet properly. Sometimes trying to repair it improperly can make it worse because it just adds more weight and focus onto that area. But if you do it properly, it's fine. Like a lot of roads will start to kind of dip in and you'll be like, ooh, potholes forming. That can sometimes be like a sinkhole because something underneath is going bad, usually in like a residential area, like a water main will break and that'll deteriorate and wash away everything else in there. Sinkholes don't have to be natural. They can kind of happen anywhere. But entire homes and cars can be swallowed, and this will lead to pollution from spilled chemicals from home products, oil from cars, all the above, general trash, much of which will fall into local water supplies, even if it's not going into the aquifer. All that shit's gonna jumble up somewhere. You know, certain areas are more prone to sinkholes than others. Places with soluble bedrock, like a limestone or sandstone, and a heavy water supply or ground disruption will be more vulnerable. Florida, Texas, and Alabama are some of the most prone states, but China has the most sinkholes in the world. But they're pretty old. However, the sinkhole capital is actually in Fountain, Minnesota, United States. Due to their karst topography and low water table, Florida has a high water table, for context. Due to the low water table, the land naturally sinks, but their sinkholes work much slower than sinkholes found more south. So these sinkholes take like eons to form, where ours are a little bit more drastic, or mine are a little bit more drastic. Fountain has about 10,000 total sinkholes and only about a population of 1,000 people living in the town. The entire county where Fountain resides is about the 10,000. But there's not many towns in that county. It's a very small, kind of rural-ish area. So I kind of just grouped it into Fountain. But 10,000 total with only about a population of 1,000. So that's about 10 sinkholes per person. They generate a huge tourist population, however, with about 8,000 coming to visit the sinkholes per year. These sinkholes are safe to visit. You'd usually be like, why the fuck are you walking on a sinkhole? They're basically like dormant volcano sort of thing. They're safe to visit because they work so slowly. Like they're not gonna really just pop up out of nowhere. And if you know that your area is really prone for sinkholes, there's usually some sort of geologist taking precautionary measures to kind of measure what's happening in the sinkhole, because like there are warning signs. You can kind of like, there's really fancy scientific devices that I don't know the specific names of, but they use kind of like magnetic fields to tell like what's going on down there and all, you know, but you can usually tell. So sinkholes have been occurring at a more frequent rate since the Industrial Revolution, when the deterioration of the ozone layer began. According to the European Geoscience Union, 5 to 10% of global permafrost will melt if temperatures rise by 2 degrees Celsius or 35.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This study's from 2004, so just keep that in mind. But since the pre-industrial revolution era, temperatures have risen about 1.3 degrees Celsius. This has a direct effect on sinkholes. For every 0.1 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature, the number of sinkholes will increase by 1 to 3%. So these weather changes will cause over and under saturation of the land, causing brittle cracking in the ground and then allowing the following heavy rains or snow to permeate the soil much easier and faster. Ironically, in years where drought is prevalent, concurring sinkholes are also at their highest. So it's not like, ooh, this month was really, really dry, all the ground's caving in. It's this month was really, really dry, and then like the following time after that, like the following year or month after that, that brittle ground eventually caves in. So it's not like, oh, today's really dry. It's concurrent. It's following afterwards. But that's been the pattern since like the 1940s. Warning signs of a sinkhole, however, other than obvious depressions and usually high technical materials in the ground, are ground cracks, foundational cracks in buildings, and wilting circular areas of dying vegetation. So like if you go into a field and you see a circle of like wilting vegetation, it could be grubs, but it also could be a sinkhole, because think of like you're watering your lawn. If all that water in your lawn is just going straight into whatever's underground, like an aquifer or something, your grass in that specific hole is not going to get any nutrients because it's not allowing it to soak up anything in the soil. It's just falling straight through at this point, which means like it's about to cave in. Sinkholes can happen anywhere. Like I said, like it can be in a residential area, it can be in a rural area. So a depression in the street can be as much as a warning sign as a depression in the dirt. So avoid high risk areas if spotted, like don't drive on the damn pothole. But in summary, fracking bad, cheap construction bad, sinkholes cool. Just don't fall in. I'm gonna post the actual essay I wrote because it's got all my works cited, so you can fact check me. Thanks.